Hey, what's up, guys? I'm Robert. Today I'm going to be talking to you about one of the albums that changed my life, like forever. And I'm pretty sure that most of you or most of metalheads like it and consider it like big influence and a big part of your lives. Even though it was not one of the groups that I discovered, like one of the first groups that I discovered, or one of the my main uh, bands that dragged me into metal. It was when I listened to it. It just, I mean, I decided that I wanted to stay there, and well, you know who I'm talking about, and it's now one of my favorite bands, and it's one of my favorite albums, which is this one. Oh, sorry, I still have it on cassette, which is Black Sabbath by the one and only Black Sabbath. Uh, I bought this cassette like 20, 21 years ago, and I still have it. I don't know if it still works. I hope it does. And I was around 13, 14 years old, and I was already into metal. Actually, Metallica was the band that dragged me into it. The album "Unjustice for All," which is my one of my all-time favorites. But I was, as it happens to everyone, just discovering bands, listening some here, some there, some heavy, some trash, some power, some, just getting familiar with all the metal thing. And then one day, I remember it was like a Saturday or Sunday, and a friend from school just dropped by my house, and he told me like, you have to listen to this. That time I didn't have a tape recorder. It was broken or something. So I remember that we went to a supermarket that is like, I don't know, like 200 meters from my house. And we went into the technology section, or I don't know how you call it, like the tech department. And we found some tape recorders in there, and we blasted. And I was listening to it. This one, actually, he brought this one and a cassette of Iron Maiden, The Number of the Beast. We listened to both albums there in this supermarket, and I remember that from the very moment that I listened side A, the thunders, lightnings, well, I didn't hear the lightnings, right? I heard thunders, and then this bell sound, and then when Black Sabbath the song started, I was shocked. I mean, I don't know if you know that feeling or that sensation you get when you discover something so awesome for the first time, especially when you're just a kid. Is one of those things that you never forget. I used to play this one like nonstop in my Walkman. Yes, I'm that old. I used to play like nonstop in my Walkman, side A, side B, side A, side B, and I just couldn't believe what I was listening. Uh, right now, talking about it, I mean, it brings a smile to my face because it was one of those things, and well, time passed, a lot of time passed. I got into metal like 100%, and I never thought of seeing them live. Like for me, it was just like something that may have never happened. And then I remember one day when they started like announcing the tour that they were coming to Mexico. I was super excited. It was like 2013. And I remember that I went with some friends, and that we usually got concerts together, and I was like super excited. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know. It was like a dream that I was gonna fulfill. By this time, I had already seen most of my favorite bands, or the big bands that we all wanted to see: Metallica, Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, Megadeth, Testament. Well, some of my favorites, and I don't know. I mean, just like having the knowing that I was gonna watch Black Sabbath, it was like a dream for me. So the place where they were gonna, or where they played, is like 1,000 kilometers from where I live. So it was like a long trip because I went on a tour on a bus, which that's another story that I will want to tell you, because it was like a huge mess. It was like 13, 14 hours on a bus full of metalheads. So everything happened on that tour. But I remember that we arrived there. We started drinking. Then we arrived when Megadeth was starting, because Megadeth opened for them in this tour. And I started to go all the way to the front. I needed to see them like from the front row. So I remember that Megadeth was doing their thing, which is always awesome. And then Black Sabbath started. I was like in trance for the whole concert. I jumping, screaming, yelling, like I went crazy. But for me, the moment that really, it was like a huge explosion for me, was when they played "Children of the Grave," one of my top five songs of Black Sabbath. And when they started to play it, I went crazy. It was like amazing for me. After that day, I said, I wish, well, I didn't wish it, but, I could have died then and there, and I wouldn't have minded, because it was like, for me, like, is a, I don't know, my all-time favorite thing that I have done in my life. Is the best thing that I have done in my life. Watching Black Sabbath live. But I missed tracks. Going back to this album, actually, it's pretty cool. I recommend it. Like, I know that everyone who starts in metal at some point comes to this. Comes to Black Sabbath, and the song Black Sabbath. Is one of the best, and one of my favorites, and the one that really like changed my life. And then when Black Sabbath finished the song, and I said, like, this can't get any better. There's nothing better than this that I have just heard. I was like 13, 14 years old, so it was like, damn, for me. And then I hear this weird harmonica, like, and then the wizard starts. Again, I mean, it hooked me again. I mean, it's like crazy. And then, I heard the wizard behind the wall of sleep, NIB, of course. I don't know, like Sleeping Village, and it's one of those things. And I hadn't heard the album like in its entirety, but last week or 2 weeks ago, I listened to it again. Not on the cassette now, Spotify and stuff. But it's a masterpiece. You have to remember, it was the 70s. Actually, it was 1970s. So 50 years ago, how could these guys have created this thing that it was actually, as they advertised it in their tour, it was the beginning of what we all love, like, of this music. It was really the beginning. The 70s were like a huge time for bands to experiment, to achieve a heavier sound, to experiment, to push it further and further and further till they get to the 80s, which for me was like the old, the best time, for at least for thrash metal, which is what the more the music that I like. Some of the 90s too, but for me, like the 80s, it was so raw. But it all started here. That's why I wanted to start, or to make this my first video with this one, like, because it all started here. It doesn't matter what music, of course, like in the metal genre, what kind of metal genre you listen to it, or what are your influences, or the new bands. Eventually, they all come to this. It all falls to Black Sabbath, like to this album, because it has influenced everyone. It has influenced everything. And just listen to it. That's the only thing that I can recommend you. Listen to it, and that's it. See you.